everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lori Petro, and I am the founder of Teach Through Love. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very special guest, Dr. Shefali Tsabary, author of The Conscious Parent, Transforming Ourselves, Empowering Our Children. So let's go ahead and get right to introducing our very special guest. Hi, Shefali, are you with me here?
Pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be with all of you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know we've been planning this for quite a while, and I've been looking forward to speaking with you about your book, The Conscious Parent, Transforming Ourselves, Empowering Our Children. This book was it was kind of a surprise. I think your publisher contacted me, and when I read your book, it was amazing because I felt like it was just a great foundation for everything that I teach. I want to give it to every parent that takes my course because I feel like it's just a foundational piece to what I provide as a parent educator. What was your impetus? I know this is your second book. Your first book was It's a Mom, What You Should Know About the Early Years of Motherhood. What brought you to write this book about conscious parenting?
Well, I think there were a couple main reasons why this book came to me. And I think one of the fundamental things I learned upon becoming a mother myself was the powerful force, the surge of the unconscious, and seeing how, because we parents don't really look at the parenting journey necessarily as a spiritually awakening one, as one that has been put on our path specifically for us to awaken, the force of the unconscious is even greater. And the other main reason was because I saw how profoundly our children can bring us to that spiritual awakening. So one, the force of our own unconscious being projected onto our children can allow us to see how we yet have to grow. And secondly, our children, being who they are, naturally in the present, full in their body, awakened to their divine potential, in that they have the ability to teach us, to lead us back to our center. So in this kind of corresponding process, in the simultaneous process, the impetus to grow becomes exponential. So when I began seeing that, both in my journey and in the journey of my clients who were parents, I realized that this needs to be written about in a very pointed way, because many of the books out there focus on the child and how to raise the perfect child and how to raise the successful child. But when we focus on the parenting journey as simply about the child, we really miss the point. And my book is really all about the awakening of the parent, and how our children make this a quicker process or a more powerful process, but how our own unconscious kind of forces us to wake up, if we choose to, and realize what this really is about, which is really the peeling away of our own unconscious, arriving at our own truth, reaching our own depths. And so this book is quite focused in that it's just about the evocation of the parental spirit and the parental potential rather than the child. The child is secondary to this.
Absolutely. And you talk about in your book that no one really explains to us what a life-altering event that becoming a parent is. It's this journey you're talking about, and no one really tells us that we're going to transform into something new. I don't think parents are quite ready for that. They seem to focus on parenting as something that we do to the children.
And that's the archaic way of looking at it, because it's something to be done, and because it's something to be done, we have been given the illusion of just knowing how to do this. You know, we've been handed this job, and with it comes this ignorant presumption that we're just going to know how it is to parent. And in doing all this, we solidify the hierarchical presumption we live with as parents, and in doing that, we solidify the ego, yes, which is really the unconscious. So the archaic model of parenting, which is that you just have to know what it is, you just have to kind of intuit your way into it,
Mm-hmm.
and without really focusing on the peeling of the layers, as it were, for the parent. Because we're not told about all that, we just have this illusion, this delusion of grandeur that, yeah, we'll just know what it is like and we'll just know what to do. So then when our children rebel, or when our children act out or have tantrums, or when our children dare to be who it is they are, this really shakes us from our center, because this is not what we were told it was going to be like. We were told we would know. We were told that we would be in charge. We were told that, we would be in the know.
Yes.
So then when our children defy that, we are shaken. And when we're shaken or we're threatened, that's when we actually drive ourselves into further unconsciousness and perpetuate that madness. So it really all begins from the way we visualize the parenting journey. It's preconception. It's the way society and culturally we have been told to think about parenting. And if that begins to change, then we'll enter this parenting process with even greater humility, with greater self-awareness, with a trepidation before we even open our mouths, before we get into that highly reactive state.
Yes.
Because we will know that, oh, this is all a mirror. This is all about me. This is about me seeing how immature I am. So, and then I'll be all the more careful, right? It's like having the teacher around all the time, having that awareness, that light shining within all the time. And of course, once we parent like this, we have greater responsibility. We're so careful with the spirits of our children. We don't, cross that boundary. And in this way, we allow our children to flourish the most.
Yes, wonderfully said. Now, you've touched on some really, really important things, and one, I think, is that this is really scary for parents. I think that some parents come in and they feel like they have to be perfect. And it's not about perfection. I don't want anyone who reads your book or listens to my classes or participates on our Facebook pages to ever think that this is about perfection, but only conscious awareness. But this paradigm shift that we're talking about, it does cause parents to sort of spin into cycles of shame and guilt and blaming themselves, and then that further enhances negative emotions and behaviors. So how do we look at our children as those mirrors that they are without becoming reactive?
So let's talk about the two elements you raised here. One is the idea, the notion, the delusion of perfectionism, which plagues us as parents.
Yes.
And the second one is the mirroring process, because they're kind of separate. So the first one about perfectionism, so our society, again, is manically obsessed with all things perfect. And there is this obsession with how things should look. So in the old paradigm of parenting, if one parents in the old way, in the traditional way, there will be this pressure to be perfect. Absolutely. There will be the notion, the delusion that we must raise amazing, successful children who are reflections of us. So parenting in the old way is all about the egoic conditioning that we have as human beings, which is all about the doing, the reaching the goal, the outward and external manifestation of divine potential, and the idea or notion of perfectionism. So as parents, we now have a choice. Should we shed? Should we let go? Should we step away from that old notion of parenting? Because it is not going to serve us or our children. And can we dare to enter a new way? And you brought up that parents are terrified to enter this new way. Because what is this new way? This new way uses completely different structures upon which the paradigm rests. There is no pillar called the perfectionism pillar. There is no pillar called I get to create my child. There is no pillar called my child must get into Yale or Harvard in order for me to feel like a good parent. It rests on entirely different ideals. I mean, it's just completely, it's not even the opposite of the old parenting paradigm. It is completely different. And I'm just going to deviate here for a second, segue here, because when people commented on Amy Chua's book, The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, and asked me to respond, they immediately thought that I would say things like, I am the conscious parenting paradigm is the opposite of Amy Chua. And quite paradoxically, it's so dissimilar that it's not even opposite. To be opposite, you kind of have to have shades of the same colors, and the conscious parenting paradigm is not even opposite. It is entirely different. Amy Chua's model, and I'm just using her as an example because she's been so talked about,
Yes.
rests on the old paradigm, which talks about perfectionism, which talks about that external manifestation of divine potential and how we as parents are pressured to create that within our children. The conscious parenting paradigm rests on the inward, still, ongoing, continual evolvement of the parent, understanding that everything that arises is a projection of the unconscious. Everything that arises is an attachment to our own belief systems, and we could believe that the sky was blue as much as we could believe that the sky was red, because blue and red are simply names we give to colors. So it is the stripping away of the old ideals and understanding that this is a journey. Our children come to us very specifically, and that specific child came to us to specifically awaken within us that which still has been left unresolved from childhood. So when we were raised as children, we were raised, of course, partly consciously, partly unconsciously. That raising brought into being a developmental ideology within ourselves, a perspective, a conditioning, call it what you will. Our biology of mind and spirit came from our childhoods. Well, because we haven't been taught to consciously relate to that biology, to that developmental structure within us, that meeting of mind and body that our parents gave us, we now get so attached to it that we don't even realize that we blindly project this onto our children. But this is where the tragedy is, and this is where the trap lies, because it is in our blind projection of that unconscious upbringing that we now regurgitate our own sense of self onto our children without allowing our children to come into and evolve into their own beings. And this is the seed of the first dysfunction. So the conscious parenting paradigm talks about how we can awaken to all that has been left unresolved within us, and this evolvement is the perfectionism. So if I had to use a word, it would be evolvement. Perfectionism has to be done away with, and instead the divine evolvement of the self is to be the new ideal of the conscious parent. So we're doing away with Yale, we're doing away with Harvard, we're doing away with Carnegie Hall, we're doing away with the brightest, the biggest, the largest, the loudest. We're doing away with being super mom, and we're understanding that this journey is nothing else but about the unfolding of the inner self of the parent. So that's what perfectionism means in conscious parenting. It means the constant evolvement of this divine self, of the essence-filled self. How still am I today? How connected was I with my child? Was I able to teach my child that their being is limitless, is infinite, has nothing to do with the doing? Was I able to look in their eyes and silently be with them, a witness to their spirit, without imposing my own being on them? These are the ideals of the conscious parent. So that was the first part of your question. Just to briefly touch upon the mirroring aspect. Our children mirror us because they are so close in energy, in biology, and in proximity to us. So they, more than other people, become the receptacles of what we put on them, because we are mostly unconscious, so we project onto them ourselves, much more than we would say onto a friend or onto our husbands or onto our partners, because we know our boundaries with them. But because the unconscious gets so murky with our children, we blindly vomit ourselves onto them. So they then either mirror right back to us in shining examples such as, Mommy, why are you being angry today? Wow, that's a mirror in its clarity. Or they may become anxious children, and we can then say, oh, are they mirroring back something that I have sown in them? Or they may become defiant, rebellious, rude, and angry and irritable children. So then we get to again say, oh, what about my presence, what about the dynamic I share with them, has helped create this. So this is how our children mirror back who it is we are. But if we follow the old parenting paradigm, we would ignore the mirror, and all we would say was, oh my God, there's something wrong with my child, let's ship them to a therapist, let's medicate them, and let's fix them. But in the conscious parenting paradigm, we don't do any of those things. We immediately see it as a mirror, and we immediately look within to see how we can, heal that which has gone off center.
How do we keep our sense of self while our children are being reactive? Or how do we let go of this reactivity, do you think? Or you talk about facing up to our own reactivity in the book, and I talk a lot about triggers in my classes. And it's almost as if we become children, and we're looking for that. It sounds like you were saying before that we almost look for validation or approval from our children instead of being sort of that secure base for them to model from.
Right. So it depends on our upbringing, on our developmental history. We have all these holes, right? These emotional holes that were left unhealed, these wounds that were left unresolved. So what happens then when we're parenting is that our children, being their own selves, begin to threaten our sense of comfort and begin to poke at those wounds, begin to hit those unresolved issues that were left unresolved within us. So depending on each person's history, what you talked about, needing validation from our children, that's one kind of scenario that can take place. When we were children, if we felt that we were not given a sense of worth and validation, and we felt empty from within, we kind of suppress this all through our lives, and then when our children come about, we kind of replay that same dynamic of searching for validation, but we do it in the wrong place. Instead of getting it from our parents, we then seek to get it from our children. And this sort of dynamic is kind of the most typical dynamic that takes place when children become extremely defiant, extremely hard to handle. It's usually because parents are kind of submissive in front of their children, kind of making their children the parents, unconsciously, of course, and needing their children's approval. Or children become really defiant because parents have become so controlling and because they feel so threatened by any sort of defiance, again from their own history, that they lay such a heavy hand that children have no choice but to become defiant. But you asked, how can we stop being reactive, right?
Yes.
So the first step is to understand in the new paradigm, in the new conscious parenting paradigm, that everything that comes up before us comes up, like we talked about, as a mirror of that which has been left unresolved. So if there's a situation in front of us where our child seems to be triggering a sense of helplessness, a sense of feeling threatened, a sense of lack of worth, a sense of inferiority, a sense of whatever issue, which leads us to then be reactive in some way. Now, reactivity could be an outward reactivity, which is where we lash out, get angry, get controlling, or it could be an inward reactivity where we kind of just, as we talked about, we get so submissive that we kind of check out. We become emotional avoiders and just leave the situation, leave our bodies, and kind of completely get misattuned.
Yes.
So reactivity happens in two ways when we're threatened. And so how do we recognize? First, we have to really enter the new paradigm, body and soul, understanding the mirroring process, that everything before us happens to show us how it is we are meant to grow. Secondly, we feel the trigger rising within us. We feel our emotions rising in our body. We have to be aware in the moment. And when that happens, we have to take it seriously. We have to not fall in the delusion that it is our child who is doing this to us.
Yes.
That it is being done to us because it exists within us. And this is the veil that needs to be lifted, because in that moment when we're so angry with our children, it really feels like our children are asking for this. It really feels like our children are pulling for this, and in an intentional, volitional sort of way. It really
Yes.
feels like, I'm going to give it to my child now. I'm really going to show her who's boss. I'm going to really teach her a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And we so believe it in that moment. It feels so right. It feels so real in that moment.
And is
it's
that
very hard.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
is that the ego state that you're talking about when you...
Yeah, because now we've lost a sense of detachment. Now we've become so attached to our belief system that we are right and they are wrong. You see,
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's so inviting because our children kind of do trigger these responses, even from a monk. They kind of seem to be good at that. So that's where the trap is, and it feels very threatening when somebody comes along and says to the parent, no, they're not really doing this on purpose, or no, they're not doing this to trigger you. You are getting triggered because this is your issue. I mean, parents get really shaken up.
Yes.
We want to be right because we feel so attacked, so stripped. But if we really can step outside our boxes, our many, many, many boxes, we would see, how can a 5-year-old really take us to that level? But
Right.
in the moment, the 5-year-old is not a 5-year-old, you see, because that wound has come back to the surface, and the wound is so big that it's no longer about a 40-year-old parent with a 5-year-old child, because the 40-year-old parent has become the 5-year-old child.
Yes, I love that. That's so true.
Right? And so how do we stop being reactive? We have to do concrete things, and we have to do spiritually regenerative things. So let me just talk about some concrete things, and you're so good about talking about these concrete steps we can take. We have to see the trigger, preempt the trigger, know yourself, know your child, and then when all else fails and you've forgotten to do all this and you're in the middle of the war, you kind of have to take a step back. You just
Yes.
have to not eat that cake. It's going to give you that 100th cavity. All your teeth are going to fall off. It's as serious as that. You have to take it as seriously as that, and just bite your tongue, bite your lip, and step out of the situation. Go out. Take a time out, breathe, get back to your center. I often tell clients, if you can't leave the room, just look outside to nature. Look at a tree.
Yes.
Look at the leaves. Get in touch with that which is continual, with that which is permanent in some way, beautiful, organic, life-affirming, because that takes us out of that attachment to the ego and our sense of rightness and that war mentality, who's right, who's wrong, and I've got to win. And
Yes.
it allows us to just come back to, this is just a transient emotion. The mood is going to go by. I'm going to still love my child. I'm going to feel really bad in a moment, so why engage? Why dance this dance? Can I just, for 5 seconds, shift my energy? Because in that 5-second shifting, there's the power to change the world.
Yes. Yes. In that space.
Exactly. And it's unglamorous. There's no glamorous technique to become more mindful. We just have to do it. And we have to build that awareness. And, when I talked about the concrete level, it's these things, stepping away, preempting, hugging, connecting before controlling, forcing yourself to connect your child even though you want to shake your child, just putting yourself in a different state of mind and being and awareness so that your thoughts can catch up. You see, the problem right in all of this is the thought. The thought is wrong in the first place, right? The thought that my child is attacking me, that's the thought is not wrong. It's our attachment and our belief that the thought, right, and our belief that the thought is right, that's causing us to react. Because what if the thought was wrong? Because it is a wrong thought, really. It's an untrue thought. But we believe our thoughts are right, so then we react. So we have to do a lot of soul searching. This is a serious process. It's no joke. Our evolvement is no joke.
Yes.
The raising of our children needs to be taken seriously. And in taking it seriously, the gifts are all ours. There's no gift to anyone but ourselves.
Yes, and I think that's so important because we're not only raising our children, but we're raising our own emotional intelligence as we do this. I mean, we've talked about how important it is to now release those triggers and not be reactive, but at the same time, you talk about in your book how there's a difference between reacting emotionally and then feeling our feelings, because we still want to feel our feelings and process them, right? You're not saying, and I know you're not saying, but just to clarify for everybody, that you're not saying stop those feelings or don't pay attention to them, but you want to transform them, it sounds like.
Well, two things. So in the moment when we are reactive, we need to lose the reactivity, because the reactivity is coming from a blind spot. The reactivity is coming from a weakness, which is ours, not our child's. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing to do at the end of the day or half an hour later, depending on one's ability, awareness, spiritual journey, is to really then sit with that feeling. What did my child just raise within me? What is this feeling about? Where is this feeling of helplessness coming about that I need to control my child in such a vicious way? Where is this need to power trip coming from? Where is the need to guilt trip coming from? Why am I sitting here with a sense of incompleteness that I am now projecting this onto my child? Why am I threatened? So then we need to sit with that feeling, because that feeling is the gateway to that wound that has been left unresolved.
And
right?
Yes, and there is the process.
And there's the process. So, but the processing is not, sometimes when we process, even in therapy, and I'm a therapist, so I see how people are used to processing. Mm-hmm. They are used to further validating the egoic conditioning. And when I talk about processing your feelings in my book, or in general, it's about really getting to the core of the false egoic attachment, because in essence we are all already perfect. So if we are feeling imperfect, instead of further ruffling the, further smoothing the ruffled feathers of imperfect, feeling, oh, poor me, I'm feeling so bad because I wasn't treated. It's not about that. It's about challenging oneself to release that false thought belief system and entering our essence. So the feeling arises, you see, because we have this false perception that we are not yet complete. But when we are in touch with our inherent completeness at a deep, deep level, then the need to feel incomplete kind of goes away. So it's a step-by-step process. That's why I always say reactivity is natural. It is the first step to understand something's going wrong within our own psyche. It is the first window that shows us that something is awry, something needs to be developed, something is spiritually misattuned, misaligned within us. So reactivity is good. So when parents come to me and tell me, oh my goodness, I slapped my son, and they expect me to judge them, I go, good. Now you know there's something, not good as in do it again.
Yeah, but there's...
Yeah, good as in there's energy that needs to be woken up. There's energy that is demanding scrutiny. Let's be brave now to go there. Let's go into that shadow. Let's go into that darkness. Let's go into that need you had to slap your child. What did you think it would achieve? Where was it coming from? What do you think your child did to you? How did your child get this power? Who gave him this power? And soon enough we find that the parent felt like a 3-year-old. The child felt like their parent, and they were trying to regain power. But as a parent now, of course, you can slap your kid, so you slap your kid. And you can slap your parents. So this is the internal work that we need to do. We need to go from reactivity to feeling to egoic attachment, like what is my misbelief about myself? Why do I believe I am incomplete, and how can my child make me feel incomplete? There's something wrong here because I am not in touch with my essence. Now I need to develop my connection to my essence, you see? So it's this multi-layered process that we have to do. And parents, including myself, sometimes we don't have time for this. We just want to fix the kid already.
Yes.
But it doesn't work like this, because when we don't go to the root of our reactivity, when we don't go to the root of the feeling, which is the thought, and we don't go to the root of the thought, which is the egoic attachment, and we don't go to the root of the egoic attachment, which is our disconnection from essence, we will never truly be complete, and we will keep these patterns going.
I have to thank you, Dr. Shefali, so much for joining me. It was enlightening. Every time I listen to something else about parenting, or I read another book, even if I'm rereading it, I feel like I'm continually opening myself up to new information, like you said, peeling the layers of of that onion. Even if we think we know all of our stuff and all of our triggers, there's just always more to learn, it seems.
Absolutely. And you do such wonderful work. I refer you every time I speak with my clients as well. So thank you for the light you spread, and it's been wonderful, and we'll do this again, hopefully.
Thank you, thank you. We definitely will. And Dr. Shefali, what do you have coming up next? Is there anything that we should listen for, any radio interviews or talks?
I do. I don't have them in front of me, but I'll post them on my Facebook page. It's Dr. Shefali Tsabary page if people are not already on there.
People can find you at www.drshefali.com.
So everybody can see your website and, of course, find you on Facebook as well.
Wonderful. This has been great. Thank you so much. And people can always ask specific questions, and I'll try my best to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Shefali. We will, I hope to do this again soon. We'll have to do another one.
Thanks, Lori. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And everybody, thank you again for joining us. This has been a very fun hour. If you did not get your questions answered, you can go ahead and visit Dr. Shefali on her Facebook page, Dr. Shefali Tsabary's Conscious Parenting page. In the meantime, visit us on the Facebook page. Everybody have a great day. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next call.